All talking, cease in the back, please. Don't want to see any bodies moving around back there. I just want to hang it right over here for the moment, just easily. A ride has been obtained for Gary Gordon, so that's not a need anymore. Oops, I still see a little bit too much noise being made out, particularly in the back. Remember this, some people stay at their tables and still want to hear the speakers. Practically every exhibitor comes to this conference with a lot of the reason so they can hear the speakers and still have an exhibit. Most of the places they go to, they don't get to do that. It takes them all day sitting in a booth someplace, and they have no idea who the speaker is. For your information, I have a number of people who call about an exhibit and just do not understand that way of doing business. Therefore, you'd be surprised how many people I strongly recommend not to come here, because I don't think they would be happy. They think that they can do better by being open all day long and trying to snare people as they come by. Most people, they have a 10-second or 10 to 30-second chance to nail them because they're just passing by a booth and they may never see them again. With here, most of you people are here for 3 to 4 days at least. So you have a chance to, they have a chance to talk and talk and talk, and you can see how that works after 5 each night and during each break time. But that's the way we work it. We always have, because our main focus is what's being presented here. The exhibits are a sideline, but a very valuable asset to the Congress, and we appreciate all the things that they do and the things that they bring. And I still see a little too much moving around back there. So this is one of my last opportunities to be an SOB. That silly old bastard. And insist that we have quiet. Do not disturb the people next to you. There are some people who have been reported repeatedly doing that, and their likelihood of being here next year now is highly problematical. Tape people? Now stay alert, folks. I'm going to give you some signals here, a sign or something. I made a mistake on the program as you read it. I said if we had 1,000 Devvy kids, we could save this country. I revised that down to 10 Devvy kids. Maybe less. And you remember what I read to you before, that little motto that I put out on the board. Never think that a small group of committed people can change the situation in the country, because that's the only way it has ever worked. So, I want to bring on Devvy kid, and I want you to be ready to join in welcoming her, if you will. And so, Dave Von Kleist, will you give us a tempo, please?
These. First of all, we're going to need everybody to help me out. I want you to go.
Right.
That's it. Just keep that going. Don't stop. All right. Keep it going.
Okay. Here we go.
Ready? Keep it going. Hello, Devvy. Well, hello, Devvy. It's so nice you're back at Global Science again. You're doing swell, Devvy. Give 'em hell, Devvy. You're still fighting, you're still righting wrongs. You're going strong. The IRS, Devvy, fails your test. Devvy, yes, you show them for the frauds they really are. So, do the best, Devvy, tearing down the IRS. Devvy, Devvy, we're behind you all the way. Come on, Joe. Because of
Dancing with you.
I am?
Devvy,
Oh!
what you do, Devvy, guys like Bannister would never see the lies. So
They told me you're going to do this song.
girl, you go, Devvy. With Jan Bannister, you know, Devvy. You're our heroes, and we'll say, Joe and Devvy, we're behind you all the way. We salute you, Devvy Kid, today.
My goodness, here. I'm embarrassed beyond belief. I understand I have to hold this, and I normally have it like that, so I'll try to do my best. In any event, I do thank you for welcoming me like this. It's really very overwhelming, and I am glad to be back here today. For the new people who don't know what I do, I'll just do a little overview of it, since we only have an hour here. Back in 1993, I formed a little project called the Project on Winning Economic Reform, and I'm so happy to see some friends I haven't seen for years. We started picketing the Federal Reserve out here in Denver, I should say the unfederal reserve, and I tried to figure out a way at that time to reach out to as many people as we could, and I wrote this little booklet called Why a Bankrupt America. And I'm very proud to say that at this point I've shipped 1,250,000 copies of this booklet all over this country. I wish I had a nickel for every one I did, but that's not the object of this. This booklet, and this is the most recent issue, does talk about the privately owned Federal Reserve, the Internal Robbing Service, the United Nothing, they call the UN, why it's so dangerous to the liberties of the people of the United States of America, and what the average person out there can do. It also has an updated addendum about the next speaker, Joe Bannister. After I ran for Congress twice and learned the cruel truth about vote fraud, I wrote a second booklet called Blind Loyalty. And I've shipped 170,000 copies of this. We truly and honestly don't know who's getting elected anymore. It is just a shame on this nation. Although after listening to Joyce Riley's presentation, sometimes these things seem a little trivial after listening to her, and my husband is a retired Army colonel, and I thank God that, you know, he came home in one piece from Vietnam, but it really does wrench your heart. But we do have other areas that we as Americans need to address if we are going to remain a godly nation. In any event, this little booklet does cover vote fraud in great detail. It's updated as much as I could fit in here of documented information. It also deals with the 57 members of the United States House of Representatives who belong to the Progressive Caucus. There can be no doubt that they are members of the Democratic Socialists of America and are working openly and flagrantly to turn the United States of America into a global sewer of something between communism and socialism. After many years into this, I decided that we had to do some other things. Oh, and by the way, I wanted to ask, is there any member of the media here? Like the Denver Post or the Rocky Mountain News? Don't want to step forward? Good. Then I'll say I'm sorry that nobody from the Denver Pravda or the Rocky Mountain Snooze had the nerve to come and hear this afternoon's presentations. I am a member of the media myself, and it's the truth. I have press credentials, and I go into my stories with an open mind and not a biased mind, but then again, I don't get paid a penny for what I do, so my agenda is the Republic of the United States of America. By the way, my bumper stickers from my website, you're welcome to take one if you'd like for your car, vehicle, for anybody you know. As the people who are on the internet know, my website is very, very extensive. In the 2 years and 1 month that it's been up online, we've had more than 8.6 million visitors to my website. People in more than 82 foreign countries have downloaded over 1/2 million pages off my website. The quest to destroy this one world government, to free the people of the world, it is global, but global in a good way. The people of the world are starting to get a real taste of what this new world order business means, and they don't like it any more than we do. In any event, after quite so many years, I got together with Larry Beecraft, and we formed a legal institute called the Wallace Institute. And one of the reasons we did that is because we could see, and of course Larry's been a constitutional lawyer out there for more than 20 years, that there's a lot of disinformation out there, and there's a lot of people who are desperate for relief. There's no question about it. This tyrannical government is so far out of control that it absolutely defies the imagination. But we could see that every day new brush fires are being lit out there. And and they're a distraction to some degree, and they keep people running around. We formed the Wallace Institute to go after the match that lights the brush fire. And this is very, very important. The brochures are in the back for the Institute. Today, and I got to put on my glasses here so I make sure I get this straight. I am particularly happy to be at a Global Sciences Convention because I firmly believe that in order to be effective freedom fighters, we have to keep our minds and our bodies healthy. Okay, it's very, very important. Obviously, if you're sick and contracting all kinds of problems physically, it also affects you emotionally, mentally, affects your family. I like to say that I'm a walking, talking billboard for alternative medicine. I practice what I preach to people. And while I have been very blessed in not getting sick all the time and ill, although I did for the first time in my life have pneumonia last January, I think I caught it at the Sacramento airport taking Bill Benson over there because I came down with it right the next day. I'm pretty darn lucky, but I work very hard at staying healthy. And it's through the alternative medicine or homeopathic or however you want to call this industry, the vitamin industry, that I feel I have stayed healthy. And I've, worked on my husband and kept him healthy at the same time. However, and a lot of you out there are already aware of this, the Federal Food and Drug Administration, and I don't think there's any children in the audience today, so I will say exactly what I think about them. They are a pimp for the pharmaceutical industry, and there's no other way to describe it. The pharmaceutical industry in the United States of America, in some respects, has done good things for people. But as the years have gone by, the greed continues to build. The agenda for a one-world government, which absolutely means population reduction. The good things are now have become the bad things, and not to mention the fact that the pharmaceutical industry in the United States holds a unique position, like the medical field in the United States. People need the product, or at least some of the products, and they're bankrupting people, trying to keep them in pills that they obviously don't need. Unfortunately, a lot of Americans don't want to take the time to take care of their bodies. They want to abuse them with alcohol and drugs and food, and then they turn around and want somebody on the East Coast to pay their medical bills. Well, that may be the way it is in a socialist country, but that's not what the Constitution of the United States of America says. But the pharmaceutical industry is already a threat to this, or the FDA is already a threat to this industry, and it's only going to escalate as newer areas of resources become open. And let me give you an example of that. Bill Clinton has tried to tie up the ocean beds, and people want to know why. Well, the commercial fishing industry in this country is being destroyed as fast as our privately owned family farms, which is of tremendous danger to the people of this country. When you will put the food supply in the hands of 3 or 4 conglomerate countries, they will own the flow of food your ability to even eat in the United States of America. Our fishing families are being destroyed by the same kind of treaties that are going to continue to severely impact this industry. But we know that the ocean beds are full of natural resources that can cure things like cancer and a variety of diseases. And so they want to tie that up. Well, it's very, very important that we understand the nature of this treaty. And I normally do not read my speeches. I have been blessed with the gift of being able to talk for long periods of time, as my husband likes to say, without lots of notes. However, but I am going to read just the part about the court cases so I don't misrepresent anything and I get them accurate. I also typed and extracted that part of it and had 100 sets of it printed up. They're on the table back there, so after I'm finished, if you all would like a copy of the court cases and the explanation of this business about the treaty, please feel free to go back there and stampede my daughter, because she was good enough to come down here today and watch my table for me. So, where does the FDA derive its authority? This is a very, very important question, and some of this legal research comes from my partner in the Wallace Institute, Larry Beecraft, and some of it is mine. But this is the skinny on treaties. Control over the possession and sale of any item within the states is not a power possessed by Congress. This was so held in United States v. DeWitt, and I'm not going to give the court cite, but it is in this document that I've printed up for you, which tested the constitutionality of a federal revenue act making it illegal to sell illuminating oil of a certain flammability. Here the court held Congress did not have the power to penalize these sales. Quote, as a police regulation relating exclusively to the internal trade of the states, it can only have effect where the legislative authority of Congress excludes territorially all state legislation, as, for example, in the District of Columbia. Within state limits, it can have no constitutional operation. More than 40 years later, Congress enacted a federal drug law designed to make criminal the possession of contraband drugs like opium. Based upon the decision in DeWitt, the Supreme Court held in United States versus Jim Fooey Moy that Congress did not have the power to make penal mere possession of drugs within the states. These two cases have never been reversed. So how did we get the DEA? Like the Fish and Wildlife Service, the origins of this federal agency is also in treaties. In 1912, the Senate adopted the International Opium Convention, C-38 Stat 1912. Later, this convention was supplemented by a similar convention of 1913, the Multilateral Narcotics Drugs Convention, ratified on March 31st, 1932, which was thereafter implemented by appropriate federal legislation designed to control poppy production within this country. In Stutz versus Bureau of Narcotics, some poppy growers sought an injunction to enforcement against them of the provisions of the act implementing the convention, their argument being the act invaded the reserved powers of the 10th Amendment. In rejecting this argument and holding that the act applied within the jurisdiction of California, the court declared, quote, the competency of the United States to enter into treaty stipulations with foreign powers designed to establish, through appropriate legislation, an internationally effective system of control over the production and distribution of habit-forming drugs is not questioned. The obligations of the United States incurred as a party to the two conventions heretofore mentioned were lawfully undertaken in the proper exercise of its treaty-making power. And Congress is constitutionally empowered to enact whatever legislation is necessary and proper for carrying into execution the treaty-making power of the United States, unquote. Other cases have also noted that control over drugs by the federal government arises from these treaties. See U.S. versus Rodriguez Camacho and Normal v. Ingersoll. And there's a later opinion in the D.C. court in 1977, which is all in this other, one you can pick up. The jurisdiction of the DEA is therefore based upon these drug treaties and thus has an international jurisdiction. Henry Hudson, who was Randy Weaver's defendant and the former head of the Marshal Service, so stated back in 1996. The power of the DEA to control bad drugs such as opium and cocaine is constitutionally indistinguishable from the similar power of the FDA to control other drugs such as vitamin B and shark cartilage. If the DEA is a treaty-based federal agency, is it not possible that so is the FDA? As you might expect, the authority of the FDA arises from a 1906 international agreement for unification of pharmacopoeia formulas for potent drugs. There are other examples of treaties being used to provide jurisdiction for federal crimes. Of course, Congress completely lacks delegated authority to control prostitution within the states. However, the agreement for repression of trade in white women was ratified by the Senate on March 1st, 1905. The implementing legislation for this treaty was the White Slave Traffic Act. The Supreme Court has noted that this treaty provides jurisdiction to enact laws on this subject, and you can see United States versus Portale. But even with jurisdiction being based upon this treaty, there are limits to prosecutions for violations thereof, and everything relating to prostitution cannot be federally controlled. See Keller versus the United States. In summary, it is quite clear that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, DEA, and FDA are treaty-based federal agencies. Under the U.S. Constitution, Congress has the power to make criminal only 4 types of conduct. Only 4 under the Constitution. They are treason, counterfeiting, piracies, and felonies on the high seas, and offenses against a law of nations. Very few people discuss which precise federal crimes fall within the category of offenses against the laws of nations, and it would be very beneficial if we knew which crimes were of this type. Obviously, the criminal provisions of the federal gambling laws and the federal drug laws can be but one thing: offenses against the law of nations. This law is on our side, and you can see Reed v. Covert, the United States Supreme Court, in the opinion of Justice Black, and this is very important to this industry. Quote, "It would be manifestly contrary to the objectives of those who created the Constitution, as well as those who were responsible for the Bill of Rights, let alone alien to our entire constitutional history and tradition, to construe Article 6 as permitting the United States to exercise power under an international agreement without observing constitutional prohibitions." And it says to see footnote 32, and since I can only use one hand, please bear with me. Footnote 32 is to see the discussion in the Virginia Convention on the adoption of the Constitution, and the site is here. In effect, such construction would permit amendment of that document in a manner not sanctioned by Article 5. The prohibitions of the Constitution were designed to apply to all branches of the federal national government, and they cannot be nullified by the executive or by the executive and the Senate combined. There is nothing new or unique about what we say here. This court has regularly and uniformly recognized the supremacy of the Constitution over a treaty, and see number 33, which is a number of cases, but the bottom line note to the item, or footnote 33. We recognize that the executive agreements are involved here, but it cannot be contended that such an agreement rises to greater stature than that of a treaty. For example, in G00231 v. Riggs, it is declared, quote, "The treaty power as expressed in the U.S. Constitution is in terms unlimited, except by those restraints which are found in that instrument against the action of the government or of its departments, and those arising from the nature of the government itself and that of the states. It would not be contended that it extends so far as to authorize what the Constitution forbids, or a change in the character of the government, or in that one of the states, or a cession of any portion of the territory of the latter without its consent," unquote. This court has also repeatedly taken the position that an act of Congress which must comply with the Constitution is on a full parity with a treaty, and that when a statute which is subsequent in time and inconsistent with a treaty, the statute to the extent of conflict renders the treaty null. It says to see footnote number 34. In Whitney v. Robertson, the court stated at page 194, By the Constitution, a treaty is placed on the same footing and made of like obligation with an act of legislation. Both are declared by that instrument to be the supreme law of the land, and no superior efficacy is given to either over the other. If the two are inconsistent, the last one in date will control the other, and it lists a bunch of cases. I realize this gets a little technical, but we're going to get to the bottom line here. The court has, let's see, I already read that. It would be completely anomalous to say that a treaty need not comply with the Constitution when such an agreement can be overridden by a statute that must conform to that instrument. There is nothing in Missouri versus Holland which is contrary to the position taken here. There, the court carefully noted that the treaty involved was not inconsistent with any specific provision of the Constitution. The court was concerned with the 10th Amendment, which reserves to the states or to the people all power not delegated to the national government. To the extent that the United States can validly make treaties, the people in the states have delegated their power to the national government, and the 10th Amendment is no barrier, as long as it is consistent with the Constitution of the United States. Which, of course, we know that many of the things that we've been seeing in the last 50 years absolutely and completely violate the Constitution. I would like to quote right here from a book that should be mandatory reading for every American in this country. It's called Debt Virus by Dr. Jacques Jacaran, who is another political prisoner. He went to federal prison for his stand against these criminals in the Internal Robbing Service. I quote from page 205 from Stephen Huber, who is a professor of law at the University of Houston, who probably is right-wing, anti-government wacko when you hear what he has to say, because that's what all of us are labeled who dare defy this criminal element in Washington. Quote, "The highest law of the land is the Constitution of the United States. The general misconception is that any statute passed by legislators bearing the appearance of law constitutes the law of the land. The United States Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and any statute must be in agreement with it to be held valid. It is impossible for both the Constitution and a law violating it to be valid. One must prevail over the other. The 16th American Jurisprudence in Section 256 in the second edition also states, the general rule that an unconstitutional statute, though having the form and name of law, is in reality no law, but is wholly void and ineffective for any purpose, since unconstitutionality dates from the time of its enactment and not merely from the date of the decision so branding it. A void act cannot be legally consistent with a valid one. An unconstitutional law cannot not operate to supersede any existing valid law." There's a huge fly up here. How's that look on the film? "Indeed, insofar as a statute runs counter to the fundamental law of the land, it is superseded thereby." Now, basically what all that says is that the FDA, being an international treaty, is crimes against nations, not against you and me. These treaties are out to destroy all industry or take it out of the hands of the people in the United States of America to benefit the few in this proposed global new world order. And anybody who's done enough homework as I have done and dedicated my life the last 9 years, I know what I'm talking about, and it's no fairy tale and it's no conspiracy theory. It's right out there for everybody to see. But what is so important is that this can be challenged in a court of law. How many people know that an executive order by a president can be overturned by a 3-judge panel? One gentleman. Well, it can, and it happens more frequently than people know, because the government's media apparatus doesn't want anybody to know that you have the power to do that, which you do. Last year, Bill Clinton issued another unconstitutional executive order, and a group of citizens group took him to court in Washington, D.C., in the federal zone out there, and the court said, hey, Billy, you've exceeded your authority under the Constitution. We know in the Lopez Mack versus the Brady Bill case, or the United States versus Mack, that the court did indeed gut the Brady Bill because Congress superseded and overstepped their authority to pass legislation. Well, we know that they continue to do this, and they're wanting to do it again. One of the ways they're wanting to do it is the medical health care. We've all heard the Democrats and Republicans, and ladies and gentlemen who don't know, I belong to no political party. I have no political axe to grind. My blind loyalty is not to any political party in this country, but rather to the truth and to restoring America to what it was and how it became great. The U.S. Supreme Court has ruled over and over and over, as late as 1978 in Linder versus the United States, that Congress cannot legislate health care within the states of the Union. They can't legislate any medical practice or health care. But yet you hear both of these parties who claim that they're very different from one another continue to waste everybody's time and money on trying to pass unconstitutional legislation that if one doctor files suit on, probably is going to be shot down by the courts unless they take some tremendous off-road from what they have always ruled. It truly is a 10th Amendment issue. We've all seen what's happened every time the United States Congress butts their inept noses into America's lifestyles. The Founding Fathers were very, very smart. They realized that nobody except God had the ability to be an expert at everything. And yet these geniuses back there in Washington continue to want to legislate every little move that we make, including this industry. And this is a big target, because what goes on in the natural health care industry and vitamins and stuff is cutting into the profits of the big boys for the world order, and it's allowing Americans to live longer, to have better quality of life, to make us strong in our bodies and in our minds so that we can stand up for the rights of all Americans. They don't want this. This is, as I said earlier, this is one of the reasons that Larry B. Kraft and I formed the Wallace Institute, because we want to get these issues in a court of law. Judicial activism can stop this massive encroachment by this criminal syndicate in Washington, D.C. And when I say criminal syndicate, I don't do that to be cute. I'm telling you, and you'll know after you hear Joe Bannister talk, they are criminals. They are breaking the law each and every day, and they are doing it unimpeded by anybody except the people and the Second Amendment, because that is the last thing standing between us and them. The Wallace Institute, and I'm going to push the Institute here because a lot of people are unfamiliar with it. We have the newsletter, our first newsletter came out. If you're on the internet, it is on my website under the Wallace Institute. If you don't have a computer, I do have a few copies left in the back. Please feel free to take it. It explains and tells you the court cases that we have right now, two very important ones in the state of Texas that have to do with Social Security numbers, the right to work and the right to not submit a Social Security number to obtain a plumber's license. As many people in this audience know, the only way they're going to track everybody is through these numbers until they eventually force us to have the chips, which, of course, no Christian in their right mind would ever accept those, although my husband and I did see on Dan Blather's nightly news down in Houston, and this was before we left here in 1997, so it's been a few years, a couple of ladies at the grocery store, happy as, you know, ticks on a hound dog, taking at their wrist and running it over the scanner. They already had the chips in their wrists. And they were very happy because they didn't have to bring their checkbook or their wallet or anything else. And I just said a little prayer for them, because obviously they're going to have a problem when they meet on Judgment Day here. In any event, I want to tell you a little bit more about the Wallace Institute, if this fly would ever go away, because it truly is very annoying while I'm trying to talk. We are getting ready at the end of September to file a 16th Amendment lawsuit, and will be in the state of Oklahoma in state court. Okay? There is no remedy in the federal judiciary. None, as far as the Internal Revenue Service goes. We can all make jokes about the IRS, but on the very serious side, to me, the very bottom line is the fact that the Internal Revenue Service was never created by Congress. It was never created by an act of law. It was never created by a statute. I have asked Margaret Richardson, who was the former commissar, I gave her the entire legislative history back to 1862, whereby Congress had intended to establish the Bureau, or the Secretary of the Office of the Secretary of the Internal Revenue Service, but in fact the following year They actually, under the revised statutes, they actually repealed their own intent. They never established it. Who are these people that are out there throwing law-abiding citizens, filling up our federal jails, destroying families? Who are these people? Well, unfortunately, you're not going to find out from any member of Congress, nor are the people of America going to find out from any of the current crop of political candidates. I was very disappointed last night watching CNN when I saw Buchanan accept the nomination for the Reform Party. I sat there up in my room and just shook my head, because Pat Buchanan was invited to the National Press Club for these symposiums. Joe's going to talk about them a little bit more extensively than I am right now. Buchanan has the law that never was by Bill Benson. Buchanan knows what's going on with the 16th Amendment. Oh, I have 25 minutes? Cool, I got a lot of talking to do. Pat Buchanan knows, okay? It's not like he doesn't understand the ramification of the 16th Amendment. There are a lot of people who say it's not important. The 16th Amendment, the United States Supreme Court ruled that it didn't confer any new power of taxation. Well, that's true. However, look what's happened since the 16th Amendment. That hasn't stopped Congress from taxing us into hell and back. But it's more important than that. It has to do with apportionment. Okay, if you're going to change that part of the Constitution has to be amended, and it has not. I say this all the time. For 9 years, 1,400 radio shows, 2 runs for Congress. How many public speaking appearances? How many one-on-one conversations? I ask the same question. Are we a nation of laws, or are we a nation of lies? Because we cannot be both. If we are a nation of lies, in which I believe, or laws, I believe that we are. That's what made America great. A fair and balanced system. If we're a nation of lies, we are going to fall, and nothing is going to stop us, because God isn't going to allow us any leeway whatsoever, because we chose lies over the truth. Pat Buchanan said last night, when he brought up in his acceptance speech, and I'm not picking on him, George W. Bush basically alluded to the same thing, that Buchanan said, when I become president, there'll be no more marriage tax penalty. There will be no grave robbing for estate taxes, death taxes, and he's going to cut taxes. And I find that very interesting, considering he knows the truth. And yet he chose last night, with a nationwide forum, live television reaching millions of people, to introduce a new lie to cover the old lie. But he said a lot of the right things. I mean, I give Pat Buchanan a lot of credit as far as treaties. He really understands the problem with treaties and sovereignty. But then he went on to say that he's going to make sure that term limits are placed on Congress and the U.S. Supreme Court. Well, excuse me, you don't have the power to do that, Buchanan. Do you all remember when the states were ecstatic, the desperate people of America, were ecstatic when they passed the term limits for Congress? I knew that the Supreme Court was going to shoot that down. If you're going to change anything in the Constitution, you have to amend it. The states cannot do that without a formal amendment that's submitted and passed through Congress to the state. So I knew it was going to go down in flames. But on my website, this is one of the things I hope reaches out to people, and that is we all must get on the same sheet of music here as far as the law and the Constitution. The President of the United States, contrary to this, well, I want to say these evil people that have been in our White House and shamed our nation so badly, but Gore and W are all guilty of the same thing. They're on the campaign trail, and they're promising to do things that the President of the United States is not authorized to do under the Constitution. The President of the United States has certain powers enumerated specifically to that office. Yes, the President may issue executive orders, but if you go to, let me see if I get this right, 5 United States Code, Section 301, you'll see the restriction of that executive order, and it doesn't apply to everybody, and that's why it is possible to overturn an EO in front of a 3-judge panel. The president can glad hand around the world, which past presidents have, and built goodwill. Because I don't know any American who doesn't want peace on earth and harmony between all countries. However, we do live in the real world of very evil people like Saddam Hussein and you know, all the rest of them. You could stand here all day. The President of the United States can veto legislation. He does not have the authority to spend a single penny of public funds. And on my website is a wonderful speech that was given by Davy Crockett that perfectly illustrates this point. And many of you have read it, I know, but for those who might not be familiar with it, Davy Crockett, he went against, there was a bill that came up in the House of Representatives, and this was way a long time ago, even older than I am, amazingly, where they wanted to give money to a war widow. And it wasn't very much money, but he was going to vote for it, and then somebody got in his face, and he said, well, let me put it this way, and he did vote for it, I think, if I remember correctly. But later on, when he was running for re-election, some guy said, I'm not going to vote for you because you voted for that and you know better. And Davy Crockett said, you're right. No matter how needy or good intentioned the money was for, and it was for a Civil War widow, or Revolutionary War widow, Congress doesn't have the authority to give away money like that out of the public treasury. But Davy Crockett said to the Congress, when the next time when it came up, he said, I will put up, I forget however much money it was, out of his own pocket. If everybody would match it, they could give this war widow the money. And guess how many people put up their hand? None. None. Nobody in Congress today would do that. They want to steal from you and me. Of course, once you understand that not a single penny that's extorted by this rogue operation called the IRS, not a penny, supports one function of the government. And that's a fact. I dare Alan Greenspan to debate me and try to defy that legal fact. Every penny extorted from your pocket goes to the central bank. I wasn't going to get into this in all that much detail, but let me just run through it real quick, just for the sake of the tape, and hopefully it'll get passed around the country, all of these wonderful speakers. Congress doesn't want the IRS to go away, okay? They want a tax to stay in effect, and I'll tell you exactly why. Since not one penny of the Internal Revenue Service goes to fund any of the government, Americans ask me all the time, well, wait a minute, how do you pay for the military? How do you pay for whatever schools? I say, number one, the Federal Department of Education is unconstitutional and it's got to be abolished. I don't care if you pour $50 trillion a year into their New World Order school system. It will make no difference in the ability of children to learn. It is the agenda that is being force-fed down their throats. First period is diversity, second period is tolerance, third period is multiculturalism, fourth period is how to put a condom on a cucumber, fifth period is lunch, sixth period is go out and have a homosexual experience. That is the public school system's agenda for the day. Okay? Anybody who's looked into Goals 2000, Education 2000, the National Educational Association, they are private organizations. I have, and I know what I'm talking about, and I dare anybody to dispute or to try to prove me wrong. The Federal Department of Education we know is unconstitutional, but Congress says, okay, we need $1.8 trillion. Well, none of it's going to come from you and me. It's going to come from corporate sales tax, excise taxes that are lawful under the Constitution, as in for tires, cigarettes, alcohol, tobacco, firearms. Unfortunately, it no longer comes from excise taxes from other countries to do business in the United States. When the Republicans got the unconstitutional NAFTA and GATT passed and signed into law by Bunko Billy, we immediately lost $400 billion a year in revenues. $400 billion a year. Of course, you all know that right now the trade imbalance is 1,000 times more than it was when NAFTA went before NAFTA, even though we were assured by these geniuses in the United States Congress, some of them who are functionally illiterate and cannot read a sentence, and I'm not kidding, that it would be just the opposite. In any event, the government takes in money from these various sources, including military hardware sales, to run the government. It's never enough, as we know. That they say they're going to need $1.8 trillion. They bring in 850 billion, 900 billion. Okay, they're still short $700 or $800 billion. That's a deficit. So what does Trent Lott, his real name, I call him Chester because that's his real name, Chester. What does Chester Lott and Dennis the Menace Hastert do? The same thing their predecessors have done. They call up to Alan Greenspan and they say, he runs the Federal Accounting Service, because they're really not a bank. They don't loan anything of value. We're forced to rent their worthless fiat currency. And they say, hey, Al, we need $700 or $800 billion in ink. Can you send it over? The minute that happens, and that money's introduced into the system, the interest never is. But you and I owe the face value of each and every one of those notes introduced now into the system. That is the debt, okay? It's really a phantom debt, and you and I actually don't owe it because the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 is unconstitutional. Unfortunately, the federal judges on the bench, there is no remedy at this point. We have looked at it, and even the antitrust aspect of it has already been legislated away. However, and this spills over into the 17th Amendment. The 17th Amendment was not ratified, okay? It was not ratified. This is one of my pet areas. For every breath I take, Dianne Feinstein and all the rest of these criminals are going to get booted out of office without any pensions and without any benefits. In fact, they owe their salary back to the taxpayers. They simply serve in office unlawfully. And again, are we going to be a nation of laws or lies? We cannot be both and be the great republic of the United States of America. I want to read you a quote because we're running down here on time a little bit. Well, first of all, I want to tell you, well, I'll tell you this first. I want to make sure that people understand that the Wallace Institute, Brigadier General retired United States Air Force Ben Parton is one of our advisory board members. The Wallace Institute is not, I repeat, not a 501c3 tax-exempt entity for the following reasons. Larry and I, we were all unanimous on this when we formed the Institute. Very important. We will not have the government dictate who we represent or how we represent them. The real bottom line is that we know without question that the Internal Revenue Service is not part of the government, so why would we want to voluntarily fill out their forms and subject ourselves and clients, now there's two flies, clients to the scrutiny of some rogue operation? To us, this idea is simply insane, and I equate it as sleeping with the enemy. This agency has no authority to do what they do, so why should we put everything on the line for future harassment by these people? Beginning in 1996, virtually every conservative organization in this country that is a 501c3 tax-exempt entity has been a target of an IRS audit. The reason is obvious, but the result has been devastating. These organizations, for no other reason than being conservative or against the policies of the Clinton-Gore administration, have had to spend tens of thousands of dollars, and in some cases like the NRA, hundreds of thousands of dollars defending themselves against the insidious IRS to protect their tax-exempt status. The Wallace Institute will not fall into this trap, and you can bet your last nickel that we would be at the top of the list for an audit the minute we file the 16th Amendment lawsuit at the end of September in state court in Oklahoma. Your monthly sponsorship is hard-earned money, and we've had people donate at one time as much as a $10,000 check. Your monthly sponsorship is hard-earned money, and it will not be wasted having to defend our policies and your rights to some rogue operation. Your monthly sponsorship is going to cure the cancer, not so we can get a tax break. If you donate $10 a month or $1,000, that donation will not be used to fight a harassment suit by some rogue operation. It goes for legal expenses, period. I don't get paid. I wouldn't even know what a paycheck looks like. Larry and I formed this institute to pursue broad public policy issues for you, so we do need your monthly sponsorship to file cases that strike right at the heart of all these treaties and unconstitutional laws and statutes. I'd like to give you a quote right before I get down to giving some other information about tonight. This should scare everybody. I mean, I don't care what political party people are. This should, Americans from every walk of life should find this extremely disturbing. In the January 7th, 1999 issue of USA Today, Robert Reich, who's the former Secretary of Labor under Bill Clinton, said the following: Quote, "The dirty little secret is that both houses of Congress are irrelevant." He also cut to the chase when he said that America's domestic policy is now being run by Alan Greenspan and the Federal Reserve, and America's foreign policy is now being run by the International Monetary Fund. Reich went on to say, quote, "When the president decides to go to war, he no longer needs a declaration of war from Congress," unquote. Now, in my lifetime as an adult, where I started to pay attention to things going on in my country, never have I seen a first couple so well protected, including treason, which I believe occurred when Bill Clinton sold our national defense secrets to the communist Chinese. And I like to stress the word communist. It is not just a word. It is a form of government where they murder their people at will. Well, I mean, what's going on is just so incredibly dangerous. This business with the IRS, and Joseph Bannister is going to get up here and talk about it in a few minutes. This is where your money's going to, ladies and gentlemen, through the central bank. It's being siphoned right into that International Monetary Fund to go support foreign governments all over the world, but doesn't really support the people. The bottom line is the Founding Fathers never, ever, ever, ever intended for that to happen to our country. How many know of Sun Tzu and his Art of War? I have studied this intensely for the last year, and I would like people to have hope out there, because once you learn how these people play the game, we now know how they play the game, and we are going to stop them. Now, let's see, week after next, August 25th, 26th, and 27th, I will be in Cincinnati for the very first ever vote fraud convention being put on by Jim Condit. This is very, very important. I hope it snowballs the same as these IRS symposiums that we've held in Washington, D.C., and they better, because I'm going to get on an airplane, and everybody who knows me knows that I'm the biggest baby in the world. I am absolutely terrified of flying, but I'm going to do it because it's so important to bring together all of these candidates where we have these, quote, anomalies during our congressional or city council or sheriff's races. As I said, and if you do, and I hope you will pick up the copies of these booklets, they won't bankrupt you, they're $1 a piece, to read the facts, the statistics, you'll understand how impossible what is occurring on voting night. In November of 1998, 12 hours before the polls opened in the United States of America, 12 hours, abcnews.com put up the results of the next day's election. 3 hours later, they pulled it down. I got a copy of it. How am I doing on time? 5 minutes? 3 hours later, they pulled it down, and in their own words, because I printed out a copy right off abcnews.com, in their own words, they said, "We inadvertently posted tomorrow's results and predictions." When I analyzed the next day's results, I'd have wished I'd have taken my entire piggy bank to Las Vegas, because they were off by only 0.174%. Okay? It's impossible. When I ran for Congress, twice, 1 minute after 8, the Voter News Service in New York City notified California's media of the outcome of all 52 House seats in our state. And you know what? At 4:16 the next morning, when the Secretary of State allegedly finished counting the ballots, they were the same numbers. They were exactly the same numbers. 11 of the races, and it's in my booklet, were virtually identical, like 81-18, 81-18, 81-18, 86-14, 86-14, 80. It's impossible. Of those 11 seats, I called their offices to find out what had to be the common denominator. No matter how many people move in and out of these counties, no matter how many people change their voter registration, no matter how many newspaper articles we see that say, 1 in 3 people will vote independent. Well, that's amazing, because you can't get a dog catcher elected on an independent ticket. Please, nothing about Jesse Ventura. I believe, and this, Jesse, this is not to insult anybody, I believe he was a joke by the New World Order architects. Well, I believe that they deliberately put him in there because he's a gross embarrassment. I know a lot of people who live in his state, and he is spending their money faster than they can stand. But anyway, that's a side issue, and I don't want to get into all that, other than to say that what is happening here in Denver, before John and I left, we were here for the '96 election. The front page of the Denver Post said, 50-year-old voting machines no longer count accurately. You can go to the library, the Denver library, and read an old issue of the Denver Post, the day of the election, whichever day it was, November 7th or 8th, 1996. Your elections officer here in Denver, she was quoted quite thoroughly in the article by saying that the machines were so old that they don't even know if they're putting the wrong candidate in office. Now, I took a lot of flack for a piece I did on my website, thank you for reminding me in my rapid mouth here, about the Electoral College. One lady accused me of taking away hope because I explained quite thoroughly about the Electoral College and the manipulation of the vote in the United States of America. If the voting machines are manipulated, or even if it is truly a glitch in the machine, guess what? You're manipulating the Electoral College. Nowhere in my I just flat out do not believe, even though there are liberal enclaves in the United States of America, that these people in the White House were elected twice. I simply don't believe it. I don't believe the people of the United States were that desperate. I started to say, and then I'm going to wrap this up, that in my life I've never seen a couple so protected. But my personal opinion, and this is just my opinion, the world order is not protecting him. You can take Bill Clinton and put him in the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders locker room as a towel boy, and you'll never hear from him the rest of your life. That's where he's at. They're protecting her. She is very dangerous, Mrs. Clinton. What makes her so dangerous is she has the ear of the women of the world, and she sells a good story. But what she really sells is immoral, terrible, terrible things. We're maybe be holding a workshop tonight. I would like to, I'm going to help Joe out for about the first hour. Be happy to take questions at the workshop. I want to go into a little more detail, which you don't have time to do right now, on the 16th Amendment and some other legal issues. People ask me all the time why I do this day in and day out, day in and day out. I don't get to go fishing. I ain't going to see my 49ers today. I don't. Well, the reason that I do this day in and day out is because I love God, flag, and country. And because there's a young woman sitting back there at my table. Her name is Brandy. She is my daughter, my only child. She's 25 years old, and she'll graduate from college December the 16th. She's the first child in my entire family to ever graduate from college. We're all very proud of my daughter, and I love her dearly. In a couple of years, when she gets out of graduate school and goes for her doctorate, she'll be called Dr. Brandy Bordeaux, and I'm the proudest mom in the world. But my daughter will be free, because when I brought her into this world, she was born with inalienable rights that no government can take away from my Brandy or your children or your grandbabies. No UN trooper is going to walk along and flop my daughter on the sidewalk on her back. It will not happen in my lifetime. This movement is way bigger than people realize because the government's media apparatus keeps such a tight rein on things. But my daughter, who is so precious to me, she will live free. She will not live with this income tax stealing from her. She will not be forced to have a, quote, Social Security number. And believe me, when I ran for Congress, I had to, every time there was a debate, I gave speeches, I had to reassure our senior, and I'll be 52 on my next birthday. I'm no spring chicken. I understand the Social Security and how very important it is to our senior population. We must honor it, and we can honor it. We don't need the income tax, but we also need to encourage anybody who, under the age of, 30 or 40, if you can, get out of it. Let the system die a natural death. There is no way to fix it. It is mathematically impossible. We can't keep compounding the problem. But as I said, Brandy, your children, your grandbabies, maybe someday I'll have grandchildren, I don't know. But I believe that God expects us to save our country, or we will get no help from him. And that's why I do what I do every single day. I want to thank Dean and his wife and his entire staff for making it possible for me to come out here to see everybody. And I want to say, God bless America and all of you, and thank you. This is hot. Thank you. Flies are driving me nuts.
I revised my record, my figures again. I think 5 Devvy kids would do it. Maybe just 1 is enough. Who knows? Anyway, we thank you so much, and her and Joe will agree to join forces tonight with a workshop, and they can go into a lot of things. That's our next speaker. So hang around, be back real quickly. I do want to give credit to Bill Colby, our members, Bill Colby and Doe Kelly, for the words of the song, Hello, Devvy.
Thank you very much. That was very sweet.
And to Dave Von Cleese for playing it as well.
I know, he did a great job.
Anyway, you all done really good.
The newsletter?
Be right back because
Have it right
we
there.
got more to come.
Yeah, no problem. I did.
No.
Okay. How many folks are inspired from what you just heard from Devvy Kid? Raise your hand. How many folks are willing to do something about it? Put
Okay.
your hands
All
up.
right.
Let me see all
Okay.
those hands. I want
Yeah.
you-